more food is never going to fix that not quite satisfied, not quite enough feeling, right? You can eat something else 20 minutes later. I'm sure you have, I have, right? You can just keep going for the next thing to graze and it still won't feel resolved. Hello and welcome back to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. Today we're going to talk about the difference between fullness and satisfaction. Because do you know what I find very odd, but also something that I see a lot is that some women, they eat until they're completely full. And I hear this all the time, right? Someone feels completely full, but yet they still feel like something is missing, right? And other women, they eat half of what they normally would. They don't finish what's on their plate and they put the fork down and they feel completely satisfied, right? And I think that second version is what a lot of people call eating like a normal person, right? This is the sense of feeling like we have that inner knowing and that inner ability to enjoy something or eat something and stop when we're finished. Now, we oftentimes say stop when we're full, but today's episode is going to be that I think what we're really looking to do is feel satisfied. And I used to think that the gap between being full and being satisfied was mostly about food choice, where you would just eat the thing that you're craving, eat the thing that you're thinking about, or eat the thing that you're supposed to eat, and the gap closes. But I have been working with women and even with myself, right? When I was navigating this distinction and trying to feel satisfied with my eating, I kept meeting women who would eat exactly what they wanted, what they were craving, right? The food they wanted, they quote unquote gave in, right? They ate the amount they wanted and they still didn't feel done. They still didn't feel like it was finished. And I want to talk about this because it didn't make sense to me for a while, but then I started asking a completely different question, which was not what was the food or like what is the food that we're going to eat in order to get to that place of feeling satisfied. Instead, I started thinking about what's the context? What's happening around the experience of eating? What's happening while she's eating it? And an example of this is there was a woman that I was working with who told me the story about how she was craving pasta. And of course, pasta was on her no eating list. It was like a quote unquote bad food, but she let herself have it. And she had it twice in 1 week, right? The first time she had it in the car, right? She ate it like super quickly. She was actually picking up one of her kids from like a sports game or like a practice or something like that. And she ate it, like she picked up some sort of convenience store version. She ate it like propped against the wheel. She was also like answering work emails on her phone, but it was like something that she had been craving that she finally, right? It was like, I finally let myself have it. And she mentioned to me and she was like, yeah, I didn't even feel, she finished it, right? She finished the actual amount of food, but she didn't feel like she actually ate it. She didn't get that experience of satisfaction. Then she had pasta again. This time she did the same thing, right? It's not like she cooked, right? This isn't a whole thing about how cooking is better than buying food. I don't believe that. I don't cook that often myself. But this time the context in which she ate it was completely different. She sat down at the table. She gave herself a nice amount of time. She wasn't feeling pulled in 100 directions from stimuli or people that needed her. And she got like 2/3 of the way through her portion, of the amount she had, the same amount as the other day. And she basically pushed it away and was like, I'm done. I don't need to eat this, right? I'm finished. When we think about it, it was the same food, the same amount, and one eating experience felt like it was just sort of like a drive-by, right? Like nothing, she didn't get any of the feeling that she was looking for. And so here's what's actually going on to close the gap between fullness and satisfaction. So fullness is a body signal. Your stomach fills up, certain hormones go up, right? The hormones that signal to your brain that you've eaten, that you're full. Your brain gets the message, and the message is there's enough food here for now physically, right? And that part, again, is physiological. It happens whether you're paying attention or not, right? This physiological part, the chemical part, it happens whether you're paying attention or not. Satisfaction is a different signal.
You've built a good life. From the outside, it looks like you have it all together. You eat clean, you work hard, you take care of everyone. But there's this one area that still feels impossible to master, and that is food. You can eat perfectly all day and still end up in the kitchen at night wondering why you keep doing this. You promise yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow, and I know you mean it every single time. But the cycle, it always finds its way back, especially when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, or when you're just tired of being the one that's holding it all together. And I get it because I lived that way for years. And what I learned is this. The problem, it was never about food. It was the pressure underneath it, the perfectionism, the self-doubt, the part of me that never felt safe and secure to just be me. And that's why I created the sober eating sequence. It's a proven 3-phase method that rewires the emotional patterns and the belief systems driving overeating so you can relax, trust yourself around food, and release weight completely naturally, without force and without obsession. Because when your body feels secure, it lets go. The cravings quiet, the self-punishment, it softens, and food, it stops being the thing that you have to fix. This is not another plan. This isn't another rule book. It's a revolutionary transformation for your nervous system, for your body, and for your identity. So join the sober eating movement today.
And it's not about food itself. It's about whether the meal got to finish as its own thing. So this is the difference. And this is why we can feel full and not feel satisfied. Think about anything else that has, a beginning and an end, like a phone call, a movie, a conversation. Like if it gets cut off in the middle, let's say the call drops or the movie, somehow you press pause on the movie, but then you turn it on again and the credits roll, or like you see the last scene, right? Or someone walks away mid-sentence, right? It doesn't feel finished, right? Something in you notices, something in you feels like there's this lack of resolution, right? Even if you got most of it. And eating, it works in the same way, actually. If a meal doesn't have a clear start and a clear end, some part of you doesn't register it as finished, right? Not because you didn't eat enough food, and not because you're not full per se, but because the meal never got to close, and therefore you didn't receive that sense of satisfaction. And I hear this a lot, right? I hear this so much, and unless you actually pay attention to it, you're not going to notice it. So for example, like a woman eats lunch at her desk, like, between emails, her plate is, next to the keyboard. She's kind of just like eating on autopilot. She finishes it, and then 10 minutes later, she can't tell you what it tastes like, but like an hour later, she's feeling like she's hungry, right? She's feeling hungry. She feels like she needs a snack, and it's like, I'm still hungry. But she's not still hungry, right? She's not still hungry. What she's feeling is that lack of resolution and that restlessness that's still sort of like, I'm missing something. But she's not necessarily missing food. She's missing the experience of the eating experience being resolved. Okay? That is really like the most important thing that you want to understand, because you want to understand how your brain handles unfinished things in general. Okay, like an unanswered text that's sitting in your phone will bother you a lot more than a text that you replied to, right? A show that stopped halfway through will stick in your head longer than one that you actually watched till the end sometimes, right? You're still kind of holding on to the potential of what's going to happen, right? Your brain holds on to things that don't get closed, and it lets go of things or feels completed by things that actually did. And the eating experience isn't any different, right? A meal that gets interrupted or, occasionally is shared with a screen or some other distractions, or eaten while doing something else. And I'm not saying that you can't ever do this, but you have to build the skill of being able to pay attention and give your attention to both things in a way where the eating experience doesn't get undermined by the other thing that you're doing, so that you lose the opportunity to feel satisfied. Okay, that's what we don't want to do. And this is the skill that I teach in a lot of my programs as well. But for a lot of us that feel confused by this, that feel like, why am I so hungry after I just ate something where I do feel full, but I keep eating past full because I'm not satisfied, that's what this conversation is really about. Because a lot of times what we're doing is keeping, we're sort of like keeping it open, right? The same way we keep an unanswered text open, right? And an open loop, it doesn't necessarily feel like hunger. It just feels like something is missing, right? When you don't have like a complete delineation of a start and an end of a meal, right? It just feels like something is missing. So you go look for what's missing. And the tool that we often, find and that we often reach for is more food, because we think that we need more food to feel satisfied. But that doesn't work, because more food was never the actual thing that was missing. What was missing was the finished meal, the resolution. And, here's the part that made me really start paying attention to this as well. Like, think about the one meal a year where almost everyone eats past the point of feeling comfortable, right? The one time of year that everyone does this is Thanksgiving. So if we think about Thanksgiving, you would think that would be the meal that leaves people the most unsettled. But the thing is, it's usually the opposite. Most people, after they eat their Thanksgiving dinner, they don't leave that table circling the kitchen an hour later looking for more food or looking for something else, right? They usually push back from the table. They usually like undo the top button of their jeans and sort of like take a big sigh, and they're like, oh my God, I'm so full, I'm so stuffed, right? And they feel done. They're like, I'm totally done. And the thing is, they are probably over full, so they are feeling full, but they're also feeling done. They're also feeling finished. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Thanksgiving meal has a real beginning. Everyone usually sits down at the same time. It has a real middle, right? You're usually at the table the whole time. You're not necessarily on your phone, and it has a real end, right? Someone, usually eventually, says something like, oh my God, I can't eat another bite. There's usually, dessert. There's appetizer, there's main, there's dessert. But typically, there's usually like a place in the meal where someone says, oh my God, I can't eat anymore, I'm totally finished. And everyone agrees and the meal is over. And it's one of the only meals all year that gets to be a full event, a full intentional event from start to finish. So even though it's the meal where people eat the most, it's often the meal that feels like it's enough, right? Where people walk away being like, I feel satisfied. I might feel gross and overfull, but I feel done. I'm not going to be like grazing in the kitchen an hour later feeling quote unquote still hungry, which is really that I'm restless because I don't feel complete from the situation. And a lot of the way that we eat the rest of the year doesn't really allow for a beginning or an end. We eat, like I said, we eat distracted, we eat while driving, we eat multitasking, right? While on your phone, convenience foods. We eat while waiting for a meeting to start online, right? It's more like it's a task that involves food as like a second thing rather than an event in and of itself or an intentional experience. And your brain treats it like that, like it's squeezed between two different things. It's sort of like unfinished. It's piecemeal. And the reason that we end up feeling unsatisfied by it is usually because the meal never got its own space to have a full arc of giving us that experience that we actually really want. So when we think about eating past full, or, when we think about that, about our eating behaviors, the question isn't necessarily like, did I eat the right food, or am I eating the right things, or am I eating too much of this thing, or did I eat the right amount of this thing, right? The real question that I want you to walk away with is saying, did this meal get to be its own thing? Did it have a start? Did it have an end, right? Or did it get absorbed into like everything else that you were doing that day, all the different priorities that you had that day? Because if the answer is no to did the meal get to have its own thing, did it get to have its own arc of experience, more food is never going to fix that not quite satisfied, not quite enough feeling. Right? You can eat something else 20 minutes later. I'm sure you have. I have, right? You can just keep going for the next thing to graze, and it still won't feel resolved. It still won't feel finished because it's just not the right solution, right? More food is not the right solution. The thing you're missing isn't more food to feel full. The thing you're missing is an ending to the eating experience. Okay, so tonight or tomorrow or whenever you sit down to eat something, notice if you actually let it begin and notice if you actually let it end, right? Because that's really the most important activity that you can do to feel satisfied by eating. Okay? So that is all I have for you today for this episode on Emotional Eating Unwrapped, about fullness and satisfaction. And if you're looking for more how to do this, like if these insights are like, wow, these are such great insights, but I really want more application and more how to, then that is what my programs are for. The Invisible Weight Detox, that is an entry point into my sober eating method. And the sober eating sequence is the full method with the complete eating strategy that I have taught, hundreds and hundreds of women where they've lost weight. They've completely just revolutionized the way that they eat in a way that feels free. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and click on those links below. And if you are interested in sharing this episode with somebody who's maybe feeling a little bit confused about how to stop eating past full and how to feel satisfied, that would be awesome as well. You could share this episode with them. You can leave us a rating and review. You can follow us on YouTube. And as always, just keep finding us every week because we love knowing that these episodes are helping you and just contributing to your life in a positive way. So until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.